What's up, everyone? Z Panther back again. I've been talking about doing a Magneton video, and this is it. Uh, Obviously, you guys kind of know what Magneton does at this point. It is basically there to trap Skarmory. That's its main purpose in the tier. Um, but often I see a lot of newer players will trap the Skarm and then just elect to stay in with Magneton and not try to use it. It is, after all, one of the 6 Pokemon on your team you're choosing to use. It can find some extra value outside of just trapping Skarmory. And there's actually quite a lot of cool tools that Magneton has um, that can do this kind of thing. So, obviously, most Magneton you see are going to be these moves here. It's going to be Thunderbolt always. Obviously, that's how you trap Skarmory. Hidden Power Fire, which is basically for Fortress, one of the other spikers in the tier. It isn't a guaranteed OHKO on Fortress, so sometimes people will run other items like Charcoal and Magneton. We'll go into like sets later, and I'll show you that. But often, it's probably the second most common hidden power on Magneton is Grass, and that is obviously primarily to chunk a Swampert if you get an opportunity. A lot of grass sets will run like Endure, and that will let you outspeed Dugtrio. So a lot of time if they'll bring in Dugtrio to Revenge Mag, you can Endure and then try to Hidden Power Grass it. But the Fire set will often run Toxic, and that's just so that it can do something to like a Swampert or a Claydol or whatever switching into it. And then often grass sets will run Thunder Wave as well. But you should kind of expect most Magneton to maybe even be dual status, because a lot of Thunderbolt, Hidden Power Fire will just run both Toxic and T-Wave as well. And then last but not least, of course, Magneton does run Protect quite a bit. To a lesser extent, uses Sub, but you will often see Protect paired with Toxic and Hidden Power Fire T-Bolt. So let's look at some sets. This is probably like just the most standard Magneton you're going to see. Max, T-Bolt, Fire, Toxic, T-Wave, like I was saying. It runs a magnet for, trying to get that OHKO on Skarmory. It actually doesn't quite OHKO. There's a small role for Skarmory to live, but typically most will be running Magnet. Here's like an example of the Hidden Power Grass set. Sometimes you'll see Sub over Endure as well. They'll just like sub into berry range, or but most often you'll see Endure. A very occasionally you might see like Hidden Power Ice here over Grass, but typically with the Endure set and the Solix set you'll be seeing Hidden Power Grass in a set like this. That set will run Timid. So that way you can outspeed like max speed Dugtrio and such. You are unfortunately still slower than Aero and Jolt. Just keep that in mind. Like, this isn't going to endure on an Aerodactyl's Earthquake and then revenge it. Like, it's not going to work that way, but it is still very cool. With Salak and Timid, though, just remember you're probably not OHKOing Skarmory. So you could possibly be letting up 2 layers, which isn't necessarily ideal, but that's just the price you pay. Here's an example of set I was talking about with Protect, and this is more of a bulkier spread. I believe this is all you need to live a Fortress Earthquake, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below, but this looks about right to me. This speed is enough for Adamant T-Tar, it looks like. And this is running Toxic Protect, so definitely a little bit more of a bulkier set. Some of the bulkier sets, cool things that they can do is like, we'll talk about it after sets. I'll like explain other ways you can use Magneton. Here's an example with charcoal. Right, so you use the charcoal to guarantee the Oko on Fortress. And then this is another cool tool that Magneton has that I think doesn't really get explored too much, but that's Reflect. So what I like to do a lot of times, some Magneton teams will be a little soft into Dragon Dance Tyranitar. I mean, you're almost certainly running a Metagross with Magneton a lot of the time. So it's not necessarily the best, most reliable T-Tar check because it is weak to Earthquake. So if you throw up a Reflect, as far as Dragon Dances, you can actually just go into Metagross and tank those hits pretty well. Makes you a lot better of a check into it. So there's a little bit of synergy there. I think too that the Reflect really helps stuff like offensive Suicune. So there's some cool applications. And then often you'll also see some kind of weather clear on Magneton. For sure it gets Rain Dance. I think it gets Sunny Day as well, yeah, so you'll see Sunny Day on there as well sometimes. You won't ever really see like Rain Dance Thunder, that's not really a thing. It's usually just clearing weather if it ever gets an opportunity. It's really not even like a priority kind of click. But that is another big reason why not to not throw away your Magneton right away. If it does have weather clear, you never know when that could come in handy if you're like your Snorlax or Suicune in the back. So, and then here's another example with Substitute. Sometimes you'll see Toxic Substitute where Magneton will Toxic a Blissey, and then it'll start subbing on it until Blissey is forced to switch, and Magneton can maintain a sub behind while something else comes in. But yeah, so things that Magneton can do after it traps the Skarmory. If you notice that stuff like Gengar, its most common coverage moves are like Ice Electric or Grass Electric. Very, very rarely you'll see like Fire Punch on it, but for the most part it is running just Ice Electric, Grass Electric coverage. And what that means is Magneton actually can kind of switch into it pretty well, since it resists those combinations. It resists Bolt Beam coverage and the Grass Electric coverage. And that's really cool because Gengar is pretty hard to switch into. So, and also switching Magneton into Gengar, you don't really care if it's getting wisped. Magneton's not a physical attacker. It's usually not even running leftovers. A lot of times running Magnet anyway. So switching it directly into a Wisp is really not the end of the world, and it lets you scare out that Gengar or throw a status around of your own like a T-Wave or whatnot. Leftovers on Magneton is pretty good though, I will say. I mean, it is sand immune, so you do get that chip heal, which is pretty nice. But yeah, checking Gengar is a really cool application that it could do. It's something that I don't think a lot of people really realize, especially when they're newer. But there's also other things it can do, like it can be an emergency like Aerodactyl pivot, like if Aerodactyl is spamming Double Edge or clicking Rock Slide. Magneton can be kind of sort of used as an emergency pivot into it, since most Aerodactyl are choice locked. You just gotta be careful, of course. Magneton doesn't really have the greatest bulk. If you look here, I mean, base 50 HP is pretty terrible. Base 95 defense, of course, is not horrible, so like you can take, I believe it is a 3-hit KO for Double Edge. I think Slide, I'm not sure what it is with spikes, but probably something similar. We can actually look at that real quick. Yeah, so Double Edge is a guaranteed 3-hit KO, Slide is a guaranteed 3-hit KO. Let's see, with a spike, it's still a guaranteed 3-hit KO, right? Okay, so like I said, it could be a pretty decent emergency pivoting Pterodactyl. Obviously, you cannot run Magneton as your only rock resist. That's just kind of ADV 101. But it is also one of its little cool utilities you can do. Obviously, this doesn't go for Tar because Tar is not choice locked into a move. I guess you could do that versus choice band Tar maybe once, but you know that's only in very desperate situations, of course. Another cool thing that Magneton can do is it can actually trap defensive Jirachi sometimes, especially the ones with T-Wave. You might not actually win the 1v1 versus a defensive Jirachi because it does carry Fire Punch, but you can often get a T-Wave off on it, which if you know paralyzed defensive Jirachi is almost useless. I mean, it's practically the worst thing that can happen to it besides being just KO'd. I mean, even something like a Will-O-Wisp is really devastating, but because it relies on Protect to actually receive its heals with Wish, losing out on turns with Paralysis is super detrimental. But that's another really cool thing that Magneton can do, is it can actually force that para on a defensive Jirachi. Of course, if your Magneton is like really chipped or something, you probably don't want to do that. But if you're running like a timid Magneton like this one, you're almost guaranteed to get that para off and maybe even T-Bolt afterwards. So pretty cool utility that Magneton has as well. And that also goes for stuff like Zapdos. Obviously, Magneton resists that electric grass coverage like we were talking about earlier with Gengar. So it can switch into Zapdos pretty well. If you look here, I mean, look, T-Bolt is 88% chance to echo after later spikes. I mean, Modest does quite a bit more. Of course, guaranteed to KO with one spike. Say there's no spike. I mean, 50% chance to KO to a KO, and with Timid, of course. Where is it? It's a guaranteed 3 KO, which is pretty cool, you know. And I don't have a spread for it, but people have talked about using like special defense on your Magneton to actually be a good Zapdos switch because its typing's actually really good. Like, you wouldn't think so because of the 4x Earthquake weakness, but I mean, it's one of the only typings to resist Bolt Beam, which is really amazing. Also, resisting Meteor Mash 4x is really great. That is also obviously one of the best utilities that Magneton has. So of course I need to mention it, is trapping a choice band locked Metagross. That's probably pretty well known by now, so I didn't think I needed to mention it earlier because it wasn't one of the more obscure ones, but definitely worth mentioning just to, you know, get as much info on this as possible. If Metagross is locked into Meteor Mash, you can hard switch Magneton directly into Metagross because it 4x resists that Steel move. Also, a mistake a lot of new players make is they'll click Hidden Power Fire on a Metagross. Don't do that. T-Bolt actually does more just because it's stab, and I'll show you guys that just so that you know I'm not messing with you. Look, Thunderbolt. I mean, this is mainly because most are running Magnet, so if you put like a different item on it, T-Bolt still does more. So just so you know, even on like, say, I don't know, say you're running a Timid HP Fire set, I don't know why you would do that, but Thunderbolt will still do more. So just keep that in mind. Click T-Bolt if you're trapping a Metagross. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Magneton has a lot of little cool utility it can do besides just trapping Skarm. I just wanted to talk about it, because I think as a new player, it's you gotta kind of figure this stuff out on your own, and a lot of this comes with experience. But when someone can just kind of tell you a little bit about the nuances of the tier, it's nice. If you guys had any questions or suggestions for a future video, I'd love to hear them. Any feedback is appreciated. But with that, guys, I will catch you guys next time. This is Z Panther, signing out.